So I accidentally opened a can of worms when talking about KO 2022 and saying this.
It's like they exhumed KO to be the direct competition to Lucky by making it basically the same game with less features. New Super Lucky's Tale is actually fun, if a bit cringe.
Well, now it's a good time to rectify that statement and say what I probably should have said quite a few years ago. Today, we'll have a look at this Super Lucky's Tale. I'm Dark Lord Elliot. Right, so I was first introduced to Lucky on Steam, and on September 25th, 2018, I would purchase this game on Steam, all because of this face. Now, this is a dirty trick that many game developers do, and it's hardly a secret. They'll slap a cute face as the game art, then the game itself is actually trash. Go ahead and look at this on pretty much any gaming platform. Do you see a cute anime girl with wizard stuff going on? Well, what I see is an on-rails scroller shooter game that's about as fun as pulling teeth and has about as many mechanics, or some JRPG that's just about as fun as waterboarding and has about as many mechanics, or in rare cases it may be an actual game not unlike Super Lucky's Tale, but generally it's one of the former two. Anyway, I fell for this trap so you don't have to. So, let's talk Super Lucky's Tale. Recently, a friend of mine lent me some Xbox stuff, which included an Xbox One S as well as Super Lucky's Tale. I remember playing it on Steam back in 2018 or thereabouts, and its newer version, New Super Lucky's Tale, on PlayStation in 2020. So I figured, sure, why not? So since I've already played this on PC and then New Super Lucky's Tale on PC and PS5, I think that this might actually be a good experience. So, let's jump right in. This was my first mistake. Let's start this off proper. Super Lucky's Tale was developed by Playful, published by Microsoft Studios, released on September 14th, 2018 for Xbox One and Steam. My first question is, to do with the opening movies, why do they look so cheap? Microsoft, who this game was made exclusively for, is one of the wealthiest companies in the world. So how did Playful not have a budget to make these opening movies more than a logo and a 3D render of the main character, which seems to pause and reverse at the end? We're talking about a game made for a company that could literally fill a swimming pool with $1,000 bills for fun. And to have this game not have ironed out these opening videos, it looks cheap and trashy. Well, Microsoft was actually only the publisher. Then why does the Microsoft logo appear first before the actual game developer? That doesn't make sense to me. Right, so once we're in the game, first things first. Thanks, Playful, for doxing my Xbox account. Yeah, anyone that opens this game will see his or her actual username, gamertag, or whatever you call it, right there for the world to see. And yes, I did assume your potential genders because there's only two. Second, for the title screen, it's basic, about as basic as it can get. Static pulsing layered images, text characters using a specialized font to describe what you'll play, but not even an option for options. Instead, you have to get into the game to get settings and options separately. But even then, there's only a total of 7, and most of them aren't worth messing with to do with volumes, controls, and preferences. You can play a new game or select one of the DLCs, except no you can't. The DLCs are completely blocked because I didn't purchase them and won't. I already have them on PC, and New Super Lucky's Tale on PC or PS5 comes with them, so I won't pay for them again. Also, there's the option to select profiles, but if you select that then go back by pressing B, the game soft locks until you actually choose a profile, despite it saying which profile is logged in, and therefore chosen. Figure that out. That had to be a glitch. Right, so let's talk about the opening cinematics, if you can even call them that. These are cheap-looking comic book style video with hard-coded subtitles. Lucky, our protagonist, is sitting at home fishing when his sister, a pilot, I think, crashes near their home. Lyra, who will now forever be known as Lucky's sister, brings back a book, but not just any book. This is the Book of Ages, capable of rewriting even history itself. The group looking to steal the book is... Are you kidding me? Yeah, this game has some issues with weird names, unfunny jokes, and puns. That'll become apparent more later, but yeah, I think that the dead giveaway here is the main antagonists in the game calling themselves kitty litter. So once the shock of these cats, metaphorically being made of excrement, wears off, now it's time to play the game. At the start of any given homeworld, Lucky's sister slips a note into the book by astonishing coincidence at exactly the right spot for it to reach Lucky. Even though, being a note in the book, wouldn't it be treated more like a bookmark? You know what, just to make it easier, let's just roll with it. Yeah, a life and 7 coins will really make my journey better. Thanks. The first thing I noticed you can do that's pretty neat is to knock smaller creatures off into the void, which is always fun to do, but serves no real purpose. Would have been a pretty neat first achievement, but no. Anyway, first impressions are, this feels wrong. Lucky feels really heavy and doesn't jump very high at all. Foxes are known for pouncing, which means they have to jump pretty high. What gives here? Oh, okay, for some reason, maybe only on the Xbox One, not sure about others, but there seems to be some inherent latency. I have to hold A to jump slightly higher, otherwise the game thinks I only meant to tap the button. This ended up costing me several lives in this playthrough that I shouldn't have, and by my count, Super Lucky's Tale owes me around 50 lives. I mean, just take a look at this clip towards the end of Present Danger. You'd be forgiven for thinking that I just don't know how to play the game, but the fact of the matter is that this game is very hard to control in the first place, and I'm actually trying. When you jump on a jump pad and hold A, the game should give you a high jump, but sometimes it doesn't. And also sometimes it gives you a bad trajectory, so the jump is just doomed from the start. This is an ongoing problem all throughout the game and desperately needs to be fixed. Also, on Xbox One, this game seems to run in 30 frames per second and has noticeable screen tearing issues at that. I configured everything for 4K 60 with HDR, so my capture equipment isn't to blame, and the capture cards smooth out all that for your viewing pleasure. Well, since I brought it up, let's talk controls then. Besides jumping, A is also used to interact with some NPCs. Sometimes NPCs will just give you unsolicited comments of what's on their mind, other times you have to press A to talk to them. Strange. Anyway, next is X for tail whip, which, I'll admit, works flawlessly because the button doesn't care if it's a light tap or hard press, it gives the same result either way. Also, X is used for picking things up in levels. B they map to dropping things instead of X, or picking things up to X instead of B. Either way, it's inconsistent. You know what's even more inconsistent? Some things that Lucky can pick up are so heavy he can't jump, but no matter what, Lucky can always jump, double jump, and even tail whip when he's holding a lantern. What sort of inconsistent logic is this? I'm willing to bet that they only tested this with the golem heads in the first few levels, but it's kind of funny to see a pool inner tube is too heavy for Lucky to jump, but a lantern isn't? What? Right, next is the triggers. Either left or right will allow Lucky to dive into the earth and tunnel through the ground to travel, or collect coins from. Y gives you the ability to look around, but with Lucky's head in the way of the bottom middle of the screen. I wonder where they got this idea from. Oh, right, yeah. Now I remember. And this brings up another limitation that I can't help but wonder what they were thinking. So, Lucky is a game that is indeed in a 360-degree open-ish world, but the camera isn't. The camera can only look, let's call it directly north, northeast, or northwest at any given time. That means if you want to see the world from another perspective, let's say west, south, or east, well, keep dreaming. Hell, sometimes I noticed that the game outright forbade me from moving the camera at all, making a fixed perspective game. Why do this, and for what reason? Fixed camera angle, I get, and it can actually be useful in some levels, like boss fights. Full camera control is preferred, but semi-fixed camera angle with only 45-degree increments? Just why? I can understand if they wanted to make some things easier to see, but wouldn't it make more sense to have 5 at that point and allow for east and west too? Oh, and probably the most immediate thing I noticed when playing this game for the first time back in 2018, you cannot move Lucky with the D-pad. Now, if the game had a use for the D-pad, outside of the movement, no problem. Several other games from this genre do that. But Super Lucky's Tale doesn't. So, there is a problem. Also, when you flick the stick, sometimes Lucky will move back the opposite direction of what you, the player, want. The analog stick has a bounce issue, and what's worse, it's not corrected for in the Xbox One software. Yeah, so these issues have been in this game since, 2017 when it was released. I don't think there's been a title update. But, I think that the developers were the ones that were playtesting this game. It seems to me that instead of hiring people to actually playtest the game, what they were doing was instead they playtested the game themselves and didn't know how to make it. Of course, that's not a good reason. It's just a reason. It's also not that clear on where you can and cannot go in this game. There are some invisible walls, but sometimes things just have no collision or weird collision, or maybe you just slip off a platform because you dared to stand at a reasonable place to be able to jump from. Also, there are things hidden on top of hills, behind buildings which you can't see because of the camera, and it's not made clear at all about where you can and cannot traverse in the game. Of course, none of these things are inherently mandatory to the completion of the game, but it's just the lack of polish that upsets me. Next is the collectibles in this game, those being lucky clovers. Are you serious? Anyway, one is awarded in levels with coins, which also include gems, worth a set amount of coins each. Collect the equivalent of 300 coins to get a clover. Lucky letters, used to spell out Lucky's name, and all 5 in a level gets you a clover. Hidden clovers, which aren't actually hidden, will just be laying there, both in various places in levels and in dungeons. And then there's the final clover, the end of the level, and that's how you leave levels. Now, I want to discuss these hidden clovers a bit because I don't really understand them. So, most of the time, a hidden clover will be located under the level in a dungeon area that has a specific challenge. Sometimes it's a time trial, sometimes it's enemies, but it's usually too easy, made difficult only by the controls acting up, and ends up being a waste of time either way. However, other levels, Golem Gateway, Piggy Peril, Loopy Lanterns, or Parting Gift, the hidden clover will be attained by means of just doing something seemingly arbitrary. And that really speaks to any consistency that this game has. Sometimes getting the hidden clover is as simple as flicking a switch, others it's about crawling in a dank dungeon. In some levels, it's actually more work just to get one lucky letter than it is to get the hidden clover. Why? Well, priorities. Sometimes Lucky does something and he celebrates by dancing with fireworks going off, but other times he doesn't. Again, priorities. Anyway, there are 4 clovers per level, and 99 in the game. Now, if you've been paying close attention to the gameplay, you'll have noticed that it's actually saying 117 clovers, and that's, well, halfway true. See, for whatever reason, the game is counting the DLC clovers and adding that to the main game.
Hey, just an edit here. Turns out they were free DLCs, I just didn't know that at the time. So, I was going onto the store to complain about how much they were, but now I've realized that they actually were free, so I guess I have to play them now.
Right, so after playing the free DLCs, I have to say that was a colossal waste of time. Albeit, now I have more gamer score, a useless number to me. See, the DLCs have separate achievements, but for some reason that I can't even begin to fathom, they're included as part of the main game. Given that the DLCs are free, they could be forgiven, but not the DLCs are just free for everyone. See, there is no good reason that this game should have Gilly's Island and Guardian Trials already installed if I then have to go to the Microsoft Store to quote-unquote buy these free DLCs. That doesn't make sense.
What the hell, Microsoft? How are you screwing up this bad?
Oh, but it gets even worse. There are 2 achievements that are borderline impossible with the current controller situation.
Yeah, so you remember how at the start of the review I was telling you that Lucky controlled like really sloppy and heavy? Well, 2 of the achievements in this game are to beat Lady M and Wrigglemania at the end of the game, both without getting hit. It's basically impossible.
Yeah, so let me paint a picture here for you. The Xbox has some inherent lag not helped by the controller, or the controller has some inherent lag not helped by the software. Either way, you can't use the D-pad, and since Lucky is heavy and slippery and the analog stick is useless for fine controls, yeah, it's one of those types of achievement. Over 75% luck and maybe 10% skill as opposed to just 100% skill. This Lady M achievement is so ridiculous that I tried for a total of around 40 minutes before I eventually gave up for the time being. But I'm not here to criticize the developers because of this trophy or achievement. It's actually quite common. No, instead I want to help make this better. So here's how I'd fix this. Instead of making the achievement for beating it without getting hit, have it instead be to finish the boss fight with full health. That means 3 out of 3 hearts. That means you can keep the cheapness of the boss fight and the jank of Lucky's controls, but the player just has to be skilled enough to beat the 3rd phase of Lady M and the 4th phase of Wrigglemania without getting hit, thereby making the boss fight more lenient, tolerant, and by extension, fun. Here's my reasoning, and I'll use Lady M as the example. As it stands now, whenever I get hit, I have to pause and go back to Gilly Island no matter what. This action takes upwards of half a minute to load back into the hub area, then immediately turn around and enter the boss fight. Also, on one occasion, I didn't even get to go back into the boss fight. It stopped me. It literally prevented me. What the hell is going on here? Why am I... Oh, I gotta go back. Oh, okay. Cool. What? Then I have to hit the Xbox Sky button because Lady M's attempt at singing pisses me off faster than the brutality of the cheapness boss fight. This was actually so avoidable. It actually makes me wonder if the developers were trying to make a rage game. Honestly, wouldn't surprise me. Now, as for Guardian Trials, somehow the Wrigglemania seems much easier to me despite it being worth double the gamer score. Figure that out! And on the note of gamer score, since I'm not a longtime Xbox guy, in fact this is my third game on the entire Xbox console series, I find gamer score to be kind of like metric, an overcomplification of what it should be. So in any given game, you're supposed to be able to attain all achievements, and all achievements combined are precisely 1000 gamer score. Here's the problem. Many of those achievements don't reflect the actual value of the stated objective. For instance, Did I Do That is awarded by dying in the Foxington hub and is worth 15. But He's Got Moves, awarded by beating Lady M without getting hit, is worth 25. In what reality does that make sense? Okay, sure, one is one DLC and the other is another DLC, but that's irrelevant. Now you might say, no, you can't compare separate DLC achievements with each other. Despite the fact that you're wrong, okay, fine, then I'll change it to Show Must Go On, which is to beat the level, secure the talent. Both achievements are valued the same, 25, but one is outright required to get the other and is in no way luck dependent. This is a huge issue with the worth of gamerscore. I prefer the way PlayStation did it, where games have one of three grades of trophy: bronze, silver, or gold. To get all trophies in a game earns you the platinum trophy for that game. Gamerscore may have come first in 2005, but it is in no way a better system. Also, to do with scores, why are some coins semi-transparent?
These are invisible for some reason.
What is the reason behind attempting to hide some of these coins? Didn't work on me even the first time I played this back in 2018. Furthermore, why do things spawn in when I do something that looks arbitrary? It doesn't make sense that this game is centered around collecting coins and clovers only for the developers to hide or attempt to hide them. For instance, in Scrambled Eggs, there are 3 secrets before going up the egg chute where you collect the C. Back down here, you get these coins around the eggs, and that's for the L. You go up to the left and get these eggs for the chickens, and that gets you some coins. Then you go over to the right and get the chickens back in their pen, and that's the U as well as an achievement. Go up to the chute, and there's the C, just sitting there, no strings attached. It's this inconsistency and the fact that nothing tells me I have to do this for the full game completion that makes this a problem. I understand the appeal of having secrets and surprises, but given how often this happens in Super Lucky's Tale, it goes from being something interesting to something that you're just expecting. At first, with the pig in the first area of the game, in Sky Castle, with the coins in the earth around her, it's a neat little secret that you can get a big coin, worth 5 smaller coins, if you get all those around the pig. Now, having that there does indeed set the tone that this is going to be a thing, and having the player find out about it through just trying things is a good way to introduce it. But that doesn't mean that every single level needs one. Towards the middle and end of the game, it's kind of weird seeing this same thing also being implemented so liberally. Also, I want to mention that in Spookington, there are boxes that are stacked up on the pier that breaking them does nothing. Let me repeat that. In a platformer, where one of the cornerstone rules is that breakable things will give you points, gems, coins, whatever you want to call them, there are boxes that you can break that will give you nothing. Nothing!
Who did this? Why would whoever did this have done this? Can we go find this guy? I want to go find this guy.
What was the reasoning behind this? Who looked at this and said, you know what this could do with? No coins for breaking these boxes. But it gets even worse. In Holiday Canyon, you can't break these vases at all. Now that's the evilest thing I can imagine. This game is so inconsistent that it's having an identity crisis in the hub worlds. Now that's impressive. Impressively bad, but still impressive. Well, since I touched it on already, let's now talk about the clovers. So you remember I mentioned that there are 99? Then if I get 4 for each level, how does that equate to 99? 99 isn't divisible by 4. Well, I'm right, and I'm glad that I hypothetically asked that. It doesn't, and that's because there are 5 types of level: regular platformer, side-scroller, auto-scroller, puzzle, and hamster ball. I've really only touched on the first 2 types of level because that's the primary focus of the game. To go over them briefly, the main kind of level is an open world, or at least 360 degree. So, while all levels are linear, these are the least linear. If you've ever played a Spyro game, you know what they are. Side-scroller levels are probably the weirdest because there's absolutely no reason for them. Not to mention, but the coins that fall from enemies don't follow these rules and instead may fall off into the foreground or background. Could you traverse in the foreground or background? In theory, yes, but the developers disabled up and down in these levels, and that's the only reason you can't. Several places in these side-scroller levels you can actually go into the background, usually to get hidden clover. As for the other levels, auto-scroller levels are side-scrollers where Lucky just keeps running to the right and you can jump, dive, attack, or do nothing, but Lucky will always move at the same speed to the same destination, one single clover. These kinds of levels are neat if you want to see how many coins you can get, but they're ultimately just boring on-rail segments. Basically the same as an easy rhythm game. Next is the hamster ball levels, which are interesting because Tess, one of Lucky's enemies in the game's lore, gives you a clover to essentially test for her. Why she does this? Knowing you're meant to be enemies? I have no idea. Still, it's nice to work with an enemy, and shows that we can set aside our grievances and work together. I like that. In Guardian Trials, it's some worm that, I don't know, maybe solved a Rubik's Cube once. Anyway, she states that, and I quote, "You're almost as smart as me." I'm sorry, who are you? How smart are you? And if you measure your intelligence in IQ points, I don't care who you are, yours immediately goes down by 30. Also, she's not that smart, and I can prove it. She doesn't have an English accent, and she's wearing nerd glasses. Boom, roasted. Anyway, next is puzzle levels. These are given by this golem that loves clovers, and will give you one per beating a level. These puzzles aren't hard, and only the last 2 made me have to stop and think, but that's more because of the number of steps involved to reach the end. Also, these levels have a glitch. When you eventually beat them, the fox statues will drop 7 coins, which is consistent, but more importantly, it despawns the fox statues, or so you would think. Turns out no, the fox statue is invisible and non-corporeal, but it's also kind of physically still there. If you tail whip where the statue is, you can move it, just as if it were still there, and even the dust effect plays. So, while I'm not sure what causes this glitch, it's harmless and just a bit of fun. This glitch exists in the Xbox and PC versions of Super Lucky's Tale. You're welcome. Another thing I can't understand is the design choices. So in at least one level, Piggy Peril, there's a spot somewhere around 20 feet away from the exit, right behind this light pole, where if you cross this invisible threshold, the music just stops. Go back, and it starts again. Another sound design choice that's weird is the sounds that enemies make when you notice them. Enemies will, for whatever reason, make a digital sound. But are they machines? I thought we were in a book, not a computer program. Why don't they make some kind of mystical sound, or piano, or something more fitting? Why this weird out-of-place digital sound? It makes sense later on in the Guardian Trials DLC, where everything is made of metal, or there's clearly a Matrix digital background, but here it just seems, well, lazy. Also, all bees apparently have crippling narcolepsy because they go back to sleep immediately after having shot one projectile.
Wait, hold up. I thought that bees literally die because their stingers, attach to their internal organs or something. How does this bee able to shoot more than once? And what about the red bees that they shoot 3 at a time? Triple dead? Why didn't they just use wasps?
Also, I hate the non-language used in this game. Some games, like Klonoa and Klonoa 2, use an actual structure to the non-language, like similar or same words for proper nouns. Generally, you can pick these out because they sound very similar to how they're written into English characters, such as the names of cities or characters' names. Super Lucky's Tale has none of that. So in Super Lucky's Tale, the characters usually have 1, maybe 2 voice lines total, which may or may not be in English, depending on the character. Whenever you receive a letter for Lucky at the start of a given area, Lucky's sister will whisper Lucky before dropping said letter, and a gift of a life and a few coins. 1 English word, although actually in this case it's a name. In that sense, I would actually argue that Lucky and his sister are the only ones speaking English because at the start of any given level, Lucky says, "Come on." breaking the fourth wall in the process. On the other hand, the only other time in the game we hear anyone speak in English is Lucky's sister in the opening movie, opening the Guardian Trials DLC, or the completion of either. After that, the developers recorded some random nonsense that could be replaced by a waterfall, jet engine, belching, burping, gibberish, a dog barking, baby talk, or total silence, and have it mean just as much. Then, just throw some text over it and call it a day. Have a listen.
Białat, Herbtaru, Biała. Showines, Herbal 2, Białsum. Yolklines, Kerbal Palsum.
Now that's cursed. And you know who did it first? Little Big Planet. For a game to be released with this kind of quality and clearly have gigabytes of data, but no real limitations of the time it was released, only for them to cheap out on the spoken language of the game, it's beyond absurd. The language in this game is just lazy.
This makes my head sad, my hands angry, and my soul every negative emotion all at once until it festers to the point where it just feels like apathy.
So as you might expect, Super Lucky's Tale has glitches, and oh boy are there glitches. One glitch you can trigger in the main screen of the game. By changing profiles, you'll be brought to the profile screen, and by pressing B, the game softlocks you into a screen with the only option being to select a profile, even though my profile is right there in the bottom corner of the screen. I haven't logged out. I have no idea how this works, but I'm genuinely anti-impressed at how this hasn't been fixed in over 7 years, because that takes the opposite of integrity. Another minor glitch, if you world select a level but quickly jump 3 spaces, 1 over 1, it'll show the third icon twice. You can also somewhat lock it on Foxington if you don't have the DLC and quickly go over that icon, but only downward. The names will change, but it'll still show Lucky and his sister holding a certificate. This one I got to happen before purchasing the DLCs and can't seem to get it now once I've actually completed it. Still, it's a glitch. Moving on into the game, in Mole Patrol, after squashing the mole, it came back to life and rammed into Lucky way faster than I could react. At the end of Operation Pointy Thing, one of the Yetis just spawned in right on my screen. Hey. So on to specific problems I have with this game, here are a few. First, I was unable to obtain this heart to replenish my hit points in the first level of the game. In Tar Springs, the K is located on an obelisk that's programmed to sink into the tar. Look, you can see it here from the vantage point, but once you're down there, you'd better be ready to get it, because the typical solution to this problem is good luck. In Pungent Paths, when you have to leave the level, it's through one of these dungeon area things where Lucky jumps directly into it. That means to deload the level and send you back to the main Veggie Village hub, you first have to go through a loading screen to load into some random island instead of it being, say, under or over the map. Now that's commitment to making a strange game. It's like forcing you to enter a house from the back door just to go through or around to open the front. And why do these ghosts sneeze? I don't think I'll ever understand that one. Sometimes coins will fall off the world in a side-scroll level, particularly annoying when you end up with just under 300 coins. I have no idea how that got past QA and game testing. Also, I want to mention another oversight here. Lucky makes this digging particle in dirt. That's fine, but then why does he also make the same dirt particle effect when he's digging through the watermelon in Juicy Tubes? Did they really not make a separate one for watermelons? Why not? Why couldn't they at least color it reddish?
What's Microsoft's value again?
Too damn much.
Oh yeah, right, thought so. Yeah, see, you'd think that they could help out a subsidiary company that's making a game for them. You know, kind of like Sony did with Crash Bandicoot, or Spyro the Dragon, or Jak and Daxter, or Ratchet and Clank.
Well, the answer is yes, and bear in mind, I'm only talking about independent studios, not ones owned by the company. It's no wonder that Super Lucky's Tale ended up on PlayStation and PC, if that's how Microsoft treated them. Right, so now that I've bored you to death with the downsides of this game, let me kill any incentive you might have to play Super Lucky's Tale by telling you about the story some more. The story here is that Lucky is stuck in the Book of Ages, and to get back to the real world, he has to make it through the gauntlets that the book has in store. For whatever reason, apparently the cats have strongholds in the book, but that's just glossed over. One could even say that that is the definition of plot convenience. So, as Lucky, you face in order of meeting them, Mittens, Tess, Buttons, and Fluffy, Lady M, and finally Jinx. The story is really basic and was obviously made for kids, but not in the good way. The good way being, kids can enjoy it, but it has a bit of deeper subtext meaning for adults. Instead, this game takes the if it ain't broke, break it approach, and relies on cringy puns, bad jokes, and no subtext meaning whatsoever. Everything you see here is as surface as it gets and nothing more. So basically, you've already probably played a game just like this before, or can just guess at the story and get it right. The only plot-related thing that happens that's even slightly interesting is that the final enemy of the game actually isn't. So the stuck-up princess, Lady M, just nopes right out of there and instead forces her father, Jinx, to deal with you. It ends up looking more disrespectful than anything else. Every character is one-dimensional and they have no redeeming qualities and no reason to exist. You can literally replace any character with any other and it would make zero difference to the game at all. Hell, you could change the game altogether by, say, making Lucky a cat and the bosses into dogs, and make zero difference to the plot of the game. The story of this game is functionally bankrupt, and this is lazy. This game's story is hardly worth the effort, and I refuse to dignify it with a proper synopsis. So, that's the story. Take it for how you will. If you think my summary was harsh, maybe you should play the game. I don't know. There are plenty of examples of what could we call an attempt at comedy in this game, but pretty much all of them fall flat on their faces. For one, Mitten does this thing where after every conversation he has with you, he ends by saying, "I vanish," and the text even has a purple wavy effect. Was that supposed to be funny? Am I supposed to laugh? What, he said the line? Oh, he said the thing! I honestly think it's funnier when an Italian guy says, "Take care," at the end of a conversation, because we know what an Italian means when he says take care of him. Well, maybe I'll find the next example funny then. Meow-malade, which, by the way, is that lemonade but with meow in front of it? Well, now that I burned that image into your head, you're welcome. Anyway, she starts using hashtags midway through knowing she even exists. Okay, cool. Was that joke funny, though? Well, it wasn't funny, nor was it relatable to me. I've never unironically used the word hashtag followed by anything else used as a hashtag ever in my life, and I intend to keep it that way. And here's the final one. They consistently use puns. This is awful. Not just bad jokes on top of bad jokes, which can actually be funny, but instead bad jokes that fall flat on their faces that make me cringe, not crack a smile. Oh, and on the main tile screen, you may or may not have noticed, but the first DLC is wrong. The bar that shows up on the bottom of the screen is correct, which is Gilly Island, but the name of the DLC on the list is a horrible, cringy, will not be repeated misspelling of Marvelous Party. Was that the internal name of the Gilly Island DLC? These puns are akin to torture and make me think of an unfunny kid that shotguns every joke he knows in quick succession, hoping that he appears funny to someone, anyone, trying desperately to be quote-unquote accepted. Don't get me wrong, there are puns that are so methodical or deep that even if I don't like them, I have to concede the creativity in making them. There are others that are so bad that you have to take a step back to appreciate how awful they are. Sometimes that is the joke. Just how bad the pun actually is. This is not that. This is just grating my soul. So I mentioned 3 hit points is all you get in this game, and just like in the previously mentioned Klonoa 2, 3 hit points wasn't enough there, and it's not enough here. And let me prove that beyond the shadow of a doubt. There are many levels where the game took an unnecessary hit, but the one in particular that I want to focus on is Juicy Tubes. My first time playing this level, I ended up playing through a couple of times, although specifically the end of the level. What happened? Well, the developers didn't bother to check if this level had enough coins to get 300 for the final clover. So instead of making a check for this, lowering the amount of coins needed to 250, adding in some coins, or maybe gems, or anything, no, they just said, good luck. Fortunately, there's a built-in exploit to the game where you can get more coins by intentionally failing a time trial, because those coins count and don't subtract from your stockpile when you fail. Unfortunately, I could only retry it twice because they added in some offset crushing watermelons, which will crush Lucky, and it's guaranteed to happen every single time, just to replay the final part of the level. I suppose it's possible to safely get 1 coin that way, then restart, but that would take forever to get the extra 50 or so needed, and of that 50 coins, you can only make 2 mistakes total. 3 and you restart from the checkpoint. If I could jump into the foreground or background, maybe it'd be possible, but with the game the way that it is, it's impossible. So I was stuck. On my first run, having lost a few lives before, I ended up with 293 coins, just 7 short of what I needed to get the 300 coins clover. That first run, I replayed that last checkpoint so many times I was actually worried I'd get a game over, so I eventually bit the bullet and just ended the level to restart. For some reason, and I don't know how or why, this time I got 409 coins! Okay then, so why is that? Were there more coins to collect? What happened? Turns out the lucky letters are worth 10 coins each. So what about the extra 59 coins I got? No clue, mate. What makes this even more egregious, in normal levels of any kind, there are very few hearts to collect, way fewer than the number of levels by far. But in the boss areas, you get hearts by, in the first one, the giant golem dropping them for you, and in every other boss fight by defeating your enemies. So, if you can get hearts by defeating your enemies, why can't we have that in the main game in the actual game levels? Why is it only relegated to boss fights? Oh, sure, you can replenish your hearts by walking into the radius of a checkpoint, but given that I want to collect as much as possible in the previous area before collecting a checkpoint, that's anti-intuitive. I said anti-intuitive, not counterintuitive. Counterintuitive is when I wouldn't think to do that, but now that it's explained, it can be done and may end up being easier or preferred. Anti-intuitive is where I do not want that, but am forced to by external factors. This game has a mechanic that's anti-intuitive. So, the way that checkpoints work in this game is, if Lucky perishes, anything you've attained in that level gets taken away, with the exceptions of letters, clovers, and various other things necessary to beat said level. So, checkpoints work exactly how you'd think. The problem is, if you have less than 3 hit points, you're being subliminally told to use the checkpoints prematurely. That's not a good mechanic to have in the game and could have easily been avoided by having the boss level exclusive replenishing hit points from defeating enemies in every level. So not only are there too few hit points, also the lives and hearts are unreasonably scarce. Basically, I recall that only a handful of levels even had extra lives, not to mention hearts. It seems to me that they only put in hearts where they knew you'd definitely need them, but the funny, or actually not thing about that is that I sometimes didn't, because at that point I was used to lag on the system and it was really only down to where Lucky decided to land due to imprecise controls, either a few pixels close enough, or a couple too far. On that note, can someone please explain to me the logic of requiring Lucky to jump on an enemy to destroy it? Why can't I spin attack these enemies like worms who look like addition is a chore, or bees that have straight up narcolepsy? Why do they just spin and spin and spin and sin? What's worse, you're never told this in the entire game. You're never told that you have to pounce on enemies, or that your tail whip is only useful sometimes, or anything of the sort. If you're going to have inconsistent game mechanics, the least you could do is justify them through a completely made-up reason or an unpronounceable made-up 4 or 5 syllable words. At least then I could take the joke, and maybe even build on it by calling it a ridiculous. Now though, that joke is just potential. So, to give an honest summary of the game, it's not the worst thing I've ever played, but coming from a company working for and likely funded by a major company with billions of dollars at their disposal, and with a team that more than likely had direct access to the hardware of the Xbox lineage, calling Lucky's Tale super is honestly disingenuous. Even mediocre is a bit much. So let us remember this game as Lucky's disappointing tale and be done with it. Overall, I can't honestly say that Super Lucky's Tale is better than KO 2022, but I do think that the remake, New Super Lucky's Tale, is actually better, even though it has way more and worse puns, and is basically a reimagining of Super Lucky's Tale. But that's not the game we're talking about now. Lucky is certainly lucky to exist, especially in its current form with no real reason for being. Everything that made Lucky's Tale is borrowed from somewhere else. Crash Bandicoot having a sister who does actual stuff, the worlds are reminiscent of Spyro the Dragon, the weird 45-degree camera angle thing is from some Mario game, I think, but I've never played a Mario game, ever. All characters being nude but with no discernible junk is from Sonic, the music playing when Lucky collects a clover at the end of the level is from Zelda, when he opens a chest, and there's probably way more than just those. If Super Lucky's Tale were to be honest, this game owes all of its creative existence to other games that came out before it, and most of those are better than it. To round this review out, the worst of the worst must have the light shed on it. I was getting rare, diamond-looking achievements for doing storyline things you'd be expected to do if you were playing through this game, and that should never be the case. I'm forced to conclude that on the home system of the Xbox One, this game was too hard or too bland or too painful for most players to beat the game, much less the first hub. Well, I concur. I got my gamer score out of Super Lucky's Tale, so that's my first ever experience with Xbox achievements on my own account with any Xbox game. But no matter what, that will always be my first. But let me be clear, it was disappointing, unnecessarily difficult, and something that I would rather not have done a second time, knowing what I went through now. With all that said, Super Lucky's Tale gets a poor 2 out of 10, and I would never, unironically, recommend it to anyone, just like KO 2022 or the Xbox One itself. New Super Lucky's Tale? That's another story that I'll cover. One day, maybe. Okay, given that I've been whinging about this game for upwards of half an hour, maybe I should say something nice about the game. From what I can tell, there's no motion blur, although Lucky moves too slow to justify motion blur in the first place. Also, most levels don't have that vignetting that I hate, which means that the brightness across the screen is consistent. Other visual stuff looks okay, but I just feel that this game is kind of in the PS2 era, looking like it was just upscaled for 1080p on the Xbox One rather than made for it. That's not a complaint or criticism, just an observation. Have a look at Klonoa 2 versus the PS5 version. Can you honestly tell me that the older one upscaled from PS2 looks better? If so, great. Answering that question means you have an opinion. Anyway, Super Lucky's Tale also made a good call on making the game appealing for a younger audience. I've been looking at this from the perspective of an adult, and I know I'm not the target demographic, but this game was designed for kids. In fact, a lot of the secrets that this game has are reminiscent of secrets from the games of the late 1990s and early 2000s. So I get what they were going for, and kids would be the ones to figure this out. All this is to say that I know I'm not the target demographic, but I do represent a large portion of the gaming community. I still stand by my score and will not be apologizing for it. So with that said, Dark Lord Elliot, we're done here. What are you using for bait there, Mr. Worm?
Humans. I'm gonna lure your mother up here, cook her up, and then eat her. You like that?
No,